All right, today we're getting into a wild story out of Australia. It's got everything. A huge lottery win, a wife who trusted her husband with, well, everything, and a secret that was buried for 20 years, just waiting to explode.
So let's set the scene. It's the year 2000. A couple, Mr. and Mrs. Ferguson, are in their 60s and boom, they hit the jackpot. Almost 4.7 million Australian dollars. I mean, can you imagine? This was supposed to be it, right? The dream retirement. No more worries, just smooth sailing.
Fast forward 2 decades, though, and that dream, it's a complete nightmare. The money vanished. And Miss Ferguson, now in her 80s, is somehow on the brink of losing absolutely everything. So how in the world does that happen? How does a lottery winner end up with nothing? Let's get into it.
Okay, so here's where things get crazy. Our story really kicks off 20 years after the big win. Miss Ferguson's husband is unwell, and she's trying to get her affairs in order, so she goes to see a lawyer. And what she learns in that office? Well, it's the kind of discovery that blows your whole world apart.
Turns out, a piece of paper she signed way back in 2001, something she barely even remembered, had signed away her own home. Her home! It was transferred to her husband's daughter from a previous marriage. For almost 2 decades, the roof over her head, the one thing she thought was hers, wasn't, and she had absolutely no clue.
So how on earth did that happen? How could something so huge go unnoticed? To figure that out, we've got to go back, right back to the year they won all that money.
So, after the win, the husband makes 2 really big moves. First, he gives his daughter, Miss George, $280,000 for a house. He calls it a loan on paper. Okay. Then, a year later, he gets his wife to sign their own home over to that same daughter. Now, on the surface, this just looks like a generous dad setting his kid up for the future, right? But was that all it was?
And here's what Miss Ferguson remembered about signing that paper. You have to picture it. Her English wasn't great, and her husband, he handled everything, all the bills, all the money. He just put the document in front of her and said, hey, we need to sign this. It's to stop the government from ever taking our house. And she trusted him. Of course she did. He was her husband. So she just signed it, no questions asked.
Okay, so flash forward again to the present day, and this is all playing out in court. And it's a huge problem, because the one person who could explain everything, the husband, now has dementia and can't speak for himself. So it all boils down to 2 people, telling 2 completely different stories, the wife and the daughter.
And, these stories are polar opposites. On one side, you have the wife, Mrs. Ferguson, saying, I was tricked, I had no idea what I was signing. She paints this picture of total deception. But then you have the daughter, who says, no, this was all out in the open. It was a family plan. Dad just wanted to make sure I got the house and my brothers didn't. So who do you believe? That was the massive question for the judge.
Think about it. How could a judge possibly know what was in the husband's head 2 decades ago? It seems impossible, right? But then, they found it. The key. And the craziest part? The evidence that would crack the whole case wide open came from the daughter's own legal paperwork.
This is it, the bombshell. Buried deep in her own sworn statement, the daughter writes this sentence. Now, she probably thought she was helping her case, showing how her dad was just trying to protect his assets. But what she accidentally did was reveal a secret fear he had, a fear that he never, ever told his wife about. The fear that one day, she, his own wife, would try to take his property.
And that right there, that was the smoking gun. Suddenly, this wasn't about protecting the house from the government or from his sons. No. This one sentence showed the husband's real intention. He was setting things up to protect himself from his own wife in case they ever split up. He was basically planning for a divorce years and years in advance without telling her.
And just like that, with that one sentence, the judge had what he needed. The secret was out. Now he could finally make a ruling.
So here's what the court decided, and it's kind of a split decision. First, that $280,000 loan, the judge said, nope, that was a gift. So the daughter gets to keep that money. But the big one, the house, which was now worth $1 million, the judge sided with the wife. He completely canceled the transfer. The house was back in play as part of the couple's assets.
The way the judge did this was super interesting. He used a specific part of Australian law, Section 106B. Basically, it gives a court the power to reverse a transaction if it was done specifically to block a future legal claim. And because of that one sentence in the daughter's statement, he had proof. He could see that the father anticipated a future claim from his wife and moved the house to stop her from ever getting it.
Okay, so this is a fascinating story, but what can we all take away from it? Well, there are some huge lessons here. First, trust is amazing, but it's not the same as knowing what you're actually signing. You've got to understand it. It also shows that just because a long time has passed, it doesn't mean a wrong can't be made right. And maybe the biggest lesson of all, every single word you put down on paper can come back to be the most important piece of evidence. Just wow.
Which brings us to a really tough question to think about. The whole mess started because one person completely, 100% trusted another. And it really makes you think, in our own relationships, in our own lives, is there a point where that kind of absolute trust without question stops being a virtue and actually becomes our biggest risk?